Welcome to the Icelandic Roots webinar 2025. We're very lucky today to have Claudia Pétursson here, who was on a 5-month tour beginning last April, traveling across North America, Canada, and the United States, presenting the Njall Saga Tapestry. And she went to a lot of different Icelandic communities and other towns in Canada and the United States, sharing with the audience a sample of the larger tapestry that in Iceland that we'll talk about, meeting people, engaging people in the sagas. And so our webinar today is for her to talk about that experience and what she learned and what she encountered along the way. So thank you, Claudia.
Yes, thanks for having me. And thanks for everybody who's joining us.
So to begin, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the lay of the land for what this tour was? When did it start? Where did it start? Where did it go? How long did it last? Um, and and then we'll get into more detail.
Sure. So I came across this project in Iceland in 2018, and I sewed on this tapestry. It was a crowd sewn project. So that to me was already remarkable that they hadn't like created a barrier of, well, only the experts get to sew or only the people who live here get to sew. So it was something sewn by the world. And they kept a logbook. So it was over 150 countries that were represented. And I like to say even Antarctica because the person that took the very first stitch on this project had walked across Antarctica. Her name is Vilborg. And she is one of, I think, like 29 people who've worldwide who've walked alone and unaided across to the South Pole. So Antarctica was even included, all 7 continents. And what this project was, or as I should say still is a 90-meter long telling of the Saga of Njall. And 90 meters is the length of a US football field or 10 yards short of a Canadian football field. So a vast, vast piece of work. And when they were close to being finished, I asked this fateful question. I said, where's it going when you're done? And they said, well, we don't have a museum and we're having issues getting the government to help us. And so I said, well, we have to get, excuse me, we have to get the North Americans involved because there are so many people of Icelandic heritage or Nordic heritage or who are interested in this type of literature, this type of history, and that they would love to be your friends. And there's a different culture in North America for philanthropy. It's not something that's typical of, people just get together and have an idea and raise money. It's just not part of the culture, at least in Iceland. So everyone was kind of surprised, like, well, no one's going to care and no one's going to help you. And I said, no, I'm really sure that this will be true. And I said, but I need you to sew me a calling card. I can't take a football field on the road. So they took about 2 years and sewed a 5-meter long excerpt, chapters 31 to 45. And we began our tour in April of 2024. And our very first stop was in Minneapolis. We were at the Society for the Advancement of Scandinavian Study conference. And I'm just going to share a picture because it's
Sure.
kind of amazing that I was here. Um, so this is a conference for, are we seeing this?
Yeah,
Yes,
we can
good.
see it.
Okay. This is a conference for really, really high level academics. And people come and, they present their papers and they're printed in a journal. And I am not an academic. I don't have a PhD. I don't teach at a university like you do, Jason. So I was encouraged by a friend to apply to present this tapestry. And they accepted me before many other papers. And I was just shocked. But I also think it's a testament to exactly what I think this project does, which is it is so interesting and inspiring that it even breaks down barriers like, academics who want very dry papers about, commas in the sagas from the 13th century. And I come with my PowerPoint and this is the presentation you can see. Um, and really talk about this sort of hands-on from the ground up, you know, just people in their everyday lives who got together to make something incredible. And fortunately, the conference was based on what's called material culture, which was not something that I was familiar with, but it's this idea of actual material, the
Hmm.
material of making this tapestry, the material of taking the wool from the sheep. So it really dovetailed. It could not have been a more perfect year for me to do this. And I was just so honored that they accepted us. So that was our first tour date. And then we had, like you said, we traveled through the typical Icelandic settlements of North America, and we had about 23 stops. I'll stop sharing. And just met the most incredible people and heard the most incredible stories and saw the impact of this tapestry. I literally had a woman in Minneapolis who came twice, two times over to see it and just sat and cried in front of it and kept looking at me and going, I don't know why I'm crying. So I was like,
Wow.
wow, I mean, this is an impact, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just to go back to this idea of the academic conference, one thing that about the project is that it's keeping culture alive because people are actually working on it. People are,
Hmm.
it's not been put into an ivory tower and people are going to talk about
Right.
what happened and you have to have special credentials to, talk about Njall Saga. It's very powerful that it's part of everyone's everyday life. Um,
Hmm.
and maybe you could talk a little bit about that because that is striking to me, and also that it gets people off their phones, off their screens, that we're very focused on, if you're not reading a Saga book in print, then you're on a screen reading a blog post or or watching a short video. And maybe you could talk about the community
Yeah,
aspect of it. And
sure. Well, again, I think if we remember kind of what the sagas were and where they came from, these were oral stories. So they came and they were about the community, the actual places in Njál Saga you can visit still. You can meet the descendants. Many people who sewed on the tapestry were descendants of actual saga characters. And so if we think about, let's say, 18th century Iceland and it's freezing cold and dark and there's no electricity, and what are people doing in the dark and the cold? They have to keep working with their hands. They have to be making things, making clothing, making farm implements. So they're sitting in their houses and they're listening to these stories that are being told by somebody. So this is, their TV or their screen. But it's this, like you say, it's this community experience. And so this is kind of where the sagas originate from, and to put them in, ivory towers and in books, and to have, academics poring over them, which is awesome. And they've
yeah,
discovered amazing things about the stories and the history, but it's a remove from where they actually came from. And so, what we saw so much of was people would come to see this tapestry, but then we also had embroidery workshops where people could learn how to sew this very particular stitch. And
hmm
I met people who are incredible fiber experts who had literally never heard of the stitch that this tapestry is sewn in. It's the Bayeux
hmm
stitch.
hmm
And the Bayeux tapestry in northern France was sewn in this stitch. And this is a tapestry also about Vikings. I like to say Vikings seem to inspire tapestries. Um, but this tapestry in northern France chronicles the Norman invasion of Britain in 1066, and but Njál Saga is modeled, that the structure is modeled on that tapestry. So we would have these embroidery workshops where people would come and learn to sew this stitch and learn to sew, they could buy kits and sew excerpts from the tapestry. And just that experience of being in a room with, let's say, 40 people who've never done something before, and the help that people would give each other. So somebody might be, better at threading a needle and someone else has never done that. So, I mean, it's that basic level
hmm
of community support, engagement. And then I have three examples of when we headed on our way to the next stop that these three communities were talking about sewing their own tapestry and not just copying what they saw, not saying, oh, okay, let's make it in this style and let's, make it about Vikings, even though they could have done that because a lot of them were these Icelandic communities. But for example, in Machosen, British Columbia, the area does a plant or kind of like a life inventory every year and chronicles all of the sea creatures, ocean
Hmm.
plants, land plants, animals, and they're up to like 2,000 or plus of these of this catalog. And they were talking about maybe sewing that catalog, those 2,000
Hmm.
plus things, and then leaving it unfinished so that every year when they found something, they'd add the next body of life. And I just thought, well, what a brilliant
Wow.
idea. And that it's so much from your own community. It's not, like I say, just copying the Saga. Then in Markerville, Alberta, which is a beautiful hamlet, it's a very small little town, or it's a hamlet, um, and very connected to Stefan G. Stefansson, the Icelandic poet. They had an idea because of the fiber that exists in their community. They have a lot of wool and sheep, and people, raise sheep, shear them, spin the wool, sell it
Hmm.
to start their saga of Markerville and the settlement with like Icelandic wool, and then at some point transfer it over into the Alberta, the local wool. So again, a
Hmm.
brilliant solution. And
Oh,
then
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, and then the final one is in Gimli. They're talking about doing the story of New Iceland. So as far as I know, people haven't started sewing yet, but just an example of you they weren't just mimicking, they were saying,
Right.
here's a community project, let's have it crowd sewn, let's get off our screens, let's dig deep into who we are and what we do here and tell the story in a tapestry.
That's great. So I got a chance to catch up with you in Gimli and in Mountain, and we co-presented about Njál Saga. Um, Maybe you can tell us a few of the themes of the saga and some of them that may have resonated with people in the audience or that they wanted to learn more about, or some experiences around the saga that in all these different towns that you went to.
Sure. I think kind of on the surface, one of the things that really resonated was my husband would proclaim the Icelandic text that is captured on this excerpt. And
Mhm.
that really, really resonated with the communities that we visited. And a lot of times because people they knew the sound of this language,
Mhm.
but they didn't speak it themselves, or it had been filtered through grandparents and kind of changed from, there's a real West Icelandic that is
Right.
studied. So it had changed from the Old Norse, and obviously Old Norse
Hmm.
to modern Icelandic has changed. So just hearing the sound of it, hearing the sound of this story was really, really impactful. And I have to say, probably the biggest highlight, other than people just being so mesmerized by the material itself. They really loved hearing the sound of the story. And then in terms of the themes, Njál Saga I think is kind of a chronicle of what happens when people don't cooperate. And that I think I'm trying to remember my statistics, but I think 159 people die in the saga, two dogs, two
Yes.
horses.
Yeah.
And wow, there's a testament to a lack of cooperation. So, and that these small communities we were in, that's really a hallmark of their communities that, especially if it's, let's say, Markerville or Mountain, when it's minus 40 in the winter,
Hmm.
you must cooperate and take care of each other. You're not going to make it through. And so there was a real resonance with that. And then there was a real resonance with these people realizing that these were their ancestors as well.
Hmm.
So I would use Icelandic Roots website and I would connect people in the room to Saga characters, and it's something they had literally never thought of. And that was really exciting. And so I had many people say, "Oh gosh, I have to go back and read this, now that I know that, Hafgether is my aunt or,
Yeah.
Unnur is my grandmother." So it made it so personal and so immediate. Um, and I'm trying to think of sort of like the themes of Vikings and bloodshed and the governance issues that you have in Njál Saga. I wouldn't say that those were hugely impactful. It was more, and I'm sorry to use this metaphor, but it's true, uh, weaving these people into this actual story
Hmm.
of saying, you really are a part of this. And, maybe your ancestors were sheep farmers, and so they know a lot about how to render wool and make things. And, you know, uh, like I said, maybe Hafgether is your aunt, and you find out that you have this really dreadful person in your line. And one story that was great was when I told the story of this character, this woman said, "Oh, that answers this mystery in my family." And I said, "Oh, tell me more." And she said, "Well, we had a relative who was named, as a baby, she was named Hafgether. And my father said, I can't believe anyone would name something that like that. It's such a terrible name." And the girl said, now the very mature woman, but as a girl, she said, "Well, Papa, why? I will not talk about it. It's just a bad name." So here we were telling the story of this character, and she's like, "You've answered this family mystery that's, like 60 years old." So that was really fun.
That is fun. Um, so in addition, so you have this embroidery aspect, this kind of handwork aspect where people are kind of technicians who want to learn about how you did it and what stitches did you use, and you have this sound of the language aspect where people were hearing how the saga sounded in its native language, and then you have this other aspect about the themes of the saga. Was there anything else do you think people uh, got out of it, or that struck them as interesting or important to them in experiencing it?
Well, we met a man in Rapid City, South Dakota, who
Hmm.
he happened to notice this little Viking that we had on our dashboard of our
Hmm.
car. We'd pulled into this parking spot, and he was interested in the car. And then he saw the little Viking, and he said, "Hey, like, tell me more." And so we told him what we were doing, and he was someone who's involved in Viking reenactment,
Hmm.
just again, like a fluke meeting this person on the street. So I invited him to our workshop that we were going to have at the public library, and he came with his wife, and both of them were very involved in Viking reenactment. And it turned out that on their property, he had built a Viking longhouse. I mean, they're serious.
Wow.
And and he did a type of wood carving that supposedly you only did by candlelight even now. So obviously back in medieval times you only could do it with
Hmm.
candlelight, but this has kept going because of the way that the candlelight kind of flickers, and you don't
Hmm.
see perfectly. And so the carvings have this very, oh gosh, well, certainly mystical, but also kind of soft and diffuse. That's the word I'm looking for.
Hmm.
And so while we were having the workshop, his wife stayed. He went and got some of these carvings and came and displayed them in the classroom. And I was so taken by the patterns. So if you look at this work of art in the
Hmm.
tapestry, you have these iterations of these patterns like knotwork, like Celtic knotwork and braiding and things like that. And to see that echoed in his work. And so I think that I think if I learned anything, it's that there's so many ways in, and people are interested for so many reasons, and that you couldn't
Hmm.
just say it's one thing. And I think the big surprise for me was I thought most of our guests would be literature people or history people or Viking, people
Uh-huh.
interested in Vikings. And I would say more it was handwork. And that
Hmm.
was the great revelation. And how many people are engaging in that in so many different ways and getting off their screens. You know,
Yeah.
that there's really like this hidden undercurrent of all these people that do things that are this material culture.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
I speaking of handwork, so have you since you live in Iceland, there's a long tradition there of embroidery. You know, if
Mhm.
you uh I mentioned we had gone to Iceland this summer. We were at Halldór Laxness's house, and his wife had embroidered a special panel for when he got the Nobel Prize. And
Wow.
I was reading Iceland's Bell recently, and the main character, Snæfríður, she spends most of her time embroidering. And so, are there differences in that in North America or Iceland? Because you're obviously in the embroidery world, so you've talked to a lot of people, or is it a commonality that's pretty much the same?
That's an interesting question because I think there are a lot of commonalities.
Hmm.
I think that if you're interested in fiber, you are always finding a way to do something with it. You know, you're felting or you're weaving or you're knitting or you're embroidering or you're crocheting, you know. But what I've also seen is that this is like a cutting edge area of invention or research.
Hmm.
So when I was in Boulder for one of our presentations, we were with the Hand Weavers Guild, and there was a woman who had dyed wool with squid ink. Now, it would never occur to me to dye anything with squid ink, but she had done this and she wasn't even selling it. You know, there was like this showcase of all this different
Hmm.
work that people were doing. And that is just a marvelous thing to dye wool with. It makes this beautiful, like silvery gray. And so I found people were very inventive, very willing to experiment, try things. They were very interested in the fiber that we were using to sew the tapestry, um, wanting to know the weight of the wool, wanting to know, you know, how it was spun, how it was dyed, and that this is just a real arena of interest for so many people. And I think too that working with our hands just does something to us as human beings. It's calming and centering, and when you're done, you have something to show for it. You know, no offense to people who do like Sudoku or something, but at the end
Hmm.
of it, you know, you don't hang your Sudoku thing on the wall. But when you are embroidering and you're spending all that time, all that really centering, peaceful time,
Hmm.
you actually end up with something at the end. And it's a testament to the time that you spent and that you created something beautiful. So I see a great, um, as I said, like this undercurrent movement of people that are just doing this work all the time because it's so good for us, you know, on a really basic
Yeah.
physical level.
Could you tell us a little bit about the artists involved in conceptualizing this project and also the fibers they chose, the dyes they chose, if there's any special things
Yeah,
to share
sure.
there?
So the two founders, one woman is Gunnhildur Etta Kristjánsdóttir, and she was the regional librarian for this area in Iceland. It's about an hour and a half east of Reykjavik, a little town called Hvalsvöllur. It's on the way to Vik. And
Hmm.
her friend Christina Bengtsson, an immigrant from Sweden, who had come as an au pair and ended up as a history teacher. And I'm so impressed with someone who can pick up Icelandic to that level that she could teach other people. They had this idea. They said, we are living in Njál Saga country, and people kind of don't know it. And they just
Hmm.
buzz through our little town on the ring road, and they're trying to get to way more interesting places. And they're missing that right here is interesting. So they had this idea to sew the tapestry, and they needed somebody to draw the pictures. So they found a very prominent Icelandic children's author. Her name is Kristín Ragna Gunnarsdóttir. And Kristín Ragna was very interested. It took her a year and a half to draw 90 meters of pictures. And also, as a children's book author, she was very aware of how she had to extract the story, how she had to, make decisions about what to choose and what to leave out. And I
Hmm.
was looking for something just recently, and she just left it out. It's just not part of the
Hmm.
tapestry at all. And I'm blanking on what I was looking for, but I was like, well, she had to make those editorial decisions. And it's the longest saga. Njál Saga is the longest saga. So how do you get it onto the length of a US football field? That's also already ridiculously long. But it took her about a year and a half. And I find her style really impressive. And I can keep talking while I search for a picture, but I just would like to be able to show everybody. Her style is very modern.
Hmm.
And you could think of it as, I don't want to say cartoony because that sounds like I'm diminishing her work. But you can see here in this picture, this is the actual 5 meter excerpt. This is the whole thing.
Hmm.
That there's a real echo to the past. There are things that are distinctly like they're from the Bayeux Tapestry. So if you look at these little, I don't know if I have a pointer here, does that cursor show up?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So these little knights here that our
Hmm.
hero Gunnar is going to toss in the air and show off to the king. This is a Harald Bluetooth of Denmark. These knights really, really look like the knights on the tapestry, the Bayeux tapestry. They actually even look French, the way that she drew
Hmm.
them with their little mustaches. Um, so there are echoes to the Bayeux tapestry. There are echoes to just, if we look at this border, to kind of classic motifs. This is an acanthus leaf border, and you would see that in all kinds of work in calligraphy. You even see this in Roman times. And then you have these borders here, like these braided borders that have this kind of Celtic echo. And so you have this kind of rootedness in the past, but I find Icelanders one of the most remarkable societies in the sense that they can be deeply rooted in the past and also incredibly forward-looking. They're not stuck there. So when you look at this tapestry, you don't see a copy of something old, but you don't see something so ridiculously new that it doesn't resonate anymore. Where it's like, well, okay, she made a tapestry about a saga, but nothing feels Viking in it, or nothing feels medieval. So I feel
Right.
that in her work, she really hit a fantastic balance between that rooted in the
Yeah.
old and looking forward.
And it's interesting how the outlines of the people are always curved, and then there are these kind of curly cues coming off of people who are moving, and
Mhm.
the colors are they're bright, but also they're not primary. They're somewhat off the normal reds and greens that we'd
Mhm.
be used to. So
Yeah.
it's really something.
And then in order, like you're asking about the actual fiber itself, in order to you know, to do the embroidery, okay, of course, I'll stop sharing here. Of course, it's got to be Icelandic wool. I mean, what else are you going to use? This is one of your
Hmm.
greatest natural resources in this country. And it's a nod again to the past and to what was typically used. And then to figure out the colors, they went to the landscape. So they used lichens, they used poplar leaves, they used lupin, um, and these some of these are not like a poplar tree is a modern import, but it is from the landscape and it is a natural product.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then once they had done all of this experimenting and getting these colors, they had to have them commercially dyed. And this was a source of disappointment to some people that came to see us. It's like, oh, really? You couldn't keep using the plants. But one of the most important issues of why they had to do that is when you do the commercial dyeing, you get a static color. So the red is the red, and the blue
Hmm.
is the blue. And I saw all the mistakes, and that's what we sewed with. We used all the rejects, so
Hmm.
people could really see the difference. They could say, oh, okay, that red was not used on the tapestry. I can see the ones that are used here. And the reason you must have this consistency is that there's a lot of coding that's color coding on the tapestry. So people are dressed a certain
Hmm.
way, and then you know, okay,
Hmm.
that's that character. If you were to suddenly be shifting all the time, you couldn't tell
Hmm.
the story
Hmm.
well. So it was really important, as much as people were disappointed that they couldn't stick with the, going and getting the lichen and dyeing the wool. You really had to do this. And it was all produced by Eastex, which is a farmers cooperative in Iceland. It's 90% farmer owned. So again, really from the community, really
You mean
from
the wool
the
was,
wool,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
was spun and dyed by Eastex. And at a specific weight. This is you
Hmm.
can't buy this weight commercially. It's so, and they had to figure that out too, what works with the density of the linen and
Hmm.
what makes sense in terms of the look that you get. So a lot of
Now,
experimenting.
are the pieces that are sewed on also wool? Is it a linen, then wool covering, and then wool pieces that are sewn on, or what are the
There are no
layers?
pieces, yeah, there are no pieces sewn on. So the bio stitch is a really interesting stitch. It did originate in, they believe, Norway,
Hmm.
and it was imported into France. They were trying to prove that it was originating in Iceland, and there still are some clues, but most people feel that it had to be Norway based on the age of artifacts that they found in the Nordic countries, and Iceland would
Hmm.
just be too late for that. But what you're kind of doing is, so you've got your linen field, and
Hmm.
then you're building these images by almost like weaving on top of of the fabric. So it's not technically a tapestry. A tapestry has its images woven into
Hmm.
them. This
Hmm.
is embroidered, it's surface embroidery that's placed on the linen, but then done in this kind of woven manner where you're laying um, your kind of foundation, and then you're tacking over, which creates kind of this woven look. So you get
Hmm.
a beautiful accuracy from this type of embroidery, and also a very sturdy piece of work. The Bayeux tapestry is over 1,000 years old, and it's showing its age, but it has not disintegrated like something else
Yeah.
that might have been done in a different way.
So does that mean even the off-white background is woven, or is that
The off-white
linen?
background is woven as linen.
That's woven. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
That was woven in Sweden by a linen factory. The Baltic countries have the environment for producing some of the best linen on earth. And so this
I
is a
see.
yeah.
So what one thing that you and Ingvar, your husband, was traveling around all these towns for 5 months, staying in different hotels, driving in, finding charging stations for your car, and all
Right.
this stuff. How did you go about choosing these locations, negotiating and promoting the events? It seems like you needed a whole team of people to make this happen because it's like a tour as you maybe a
Mm.
rock band would go on or
Right,
something.
exactly.
How is that done?
It's funny you say that, Jason, because I kept joking. We needed our Willie Nelson bus. You know,
That's right.
we were on tour. Um, well, my thought was to follow the Icelandic immigration trail that had originally started in like Winnipeg and Gimli, Manitoba,
Hmm.
and they're celebrating their 150th anniversary. 1875, I think, was when they came.
Hmm.
Um, and so what I would do is I would just approach these different communities and I would say, hey, we've got this tapestry and we'd love to come and see you. And I I only got one no in all my asks. Actually, two no's. One, we couldn't schedule. Yeah, they're both about not scheduling. One was the
Hmm.
Nome Schoolhouse. We just couldn't work out the schedule, but they'd love us to come back. And then the other was the Icelandic Embassy in DC. They share the building with the Swedish Embassy, and it's just not a good environment for bringing all kinds of people in off the street because of
Hmm.
security vetting and that sort of thing.
Right.
So
Right.
um, but yeah, it was just here's my idea, here's what we'd like to do, and it was yes, 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 because this is just so unique. And I think a lot of these communities need another thing, a new
Hmm.
thing. It's like, okay,
A
they
lot of
have
small communities thrive on on
Yeah.
events like that, new things to do,
Hmm.
and so you just cold called people, found out, looked online to see who runs the city or who runs
Yeah.
the rec center or whatever it is, and called.
Yes. And
Okay.
then people would tell each other. So one of the
Hmm.
first ones, I think our first invitation was to the Yemkomst Center in Moorhead, Minnesota, where
Hmm.
they have the Yemkomst ship that
Hmm.
sailed from Minneapolis, basically to, well, no, from Moorhead to Norway. They found out about us by word of mouth from another Icelandic event that where someone was talking about this. So there was definitely a lot of networking where people would say, "Hey, I heard about you. Would you come here?" And
Okay. And
yeah,
then did you have to promote it all, or did you rely on the towns and rec centers to promote?
that they would do the promotion.
Okay.
And I felt that, they're the ones on the ground. They know their communities. They know how they do this. And so unless they asked
Hmm.
me, I would say, you do what works. Um, and they were very effective. Like we were just talking to Rob before we started. When we got to Blaine, Blaine is about an hour and a half north of Seattle. It's a traditional Icelandic settlement community. We had people at the public library, and I couldn't actually see them. It was standing room only out the door. And Rob said to me at one point, he said, "Hey, I think we need to let some more of these people come in and see." And I was like, "Well, what people?" It's like, "Oh my goodness." And this is a very small community.
Hmm.
And it was standing room only. It was
Wow.
just such interest.
And were you usually at public event spaces, or did you do any commercial spaces at shopping malls or bookstores or other places?
No, it tended to be community or art
Hmm.
centers. And in
Art
Machosen,
centers.
we
Yeah.
were at their art center. In Minneapolis, we were at the Danish American Center, which is just a beautiful old building, long standing Danish community club. I think it's over 100 years old, and yeah, so it just depended. Excuse me. In Markerville, there's a historic creamery there, and we were in the basement. And this is what was so lovely too is you think, oh well, you were in the basement of the creamery. It was a beautiful space, and it had some of the best lighting we had on the tapestry for the whole tour. So you just never knew. You never knew what you'd find. We didn't do site visits ahead of time. That would have been really hard and a whole other tour. But just
Yeah.
welcoming, intrepid communities who just put their resources to work, and we had really wonderful events.
That's great. So, if people have questions, we have them in the Q&A. There's a Q&A button, and we've already got three questions. Maybe I'll read some of these off. So,
Sure.
um, I was lucky at Iceland Noir last week to meet Kristen Rachna, who illustrated the tapestry. She's so keen to make the sagas accessible to the next generation. So, this is a wonderful history that I hope does not fade away. I would love to see the tapestry and can't wait for a suitable home to be found and created for it. But I have seen an image of the tapestry displayed in sections. Has it been cut up from its original 90-meter length? Are those extra? No, we haven't cut the tapestry. Okay.
No, in fact, we're trying to get the Guinness Book of World Records to recognize us as the longest continuous hand sewn tapestry on Earth. And I
Mhm.
will get to the person's question in a second, but there are many of these tapestry projects around the world, and a lot of times they're done in panels. So for instance, like the Scottish diaspora tapestry, I think is like 300 panels, square meter panels.
Mhm.
And they're fabulous and they're beautiful. And I'm not like taking it away from anybody, but this may be the longest hand sewn continuous tapestry on earth. So that's what we're trying to prove.
Oh, that's great.
If you've seen excerpts, you have either seen the tapestry that we took on tour. It used to hang in the Hotel Rangau, which is a beautiful hotel in Hetla, which is on the way to Hvalsvatn. And then you may have seen there are kits people can buy that support the building of the museum. And these are excerpts. So, for example, in the one that I showed you, there's a Viking ship, and you can buy that as a tapestry kit. So, I hope that's what you've seen. And I do hope that we will have somewhere to show the entire 90 meters. I have never seen the whole thing. I've seen all the images, but I have never seen the whole thing on display once it was sewn, and I need to see that too.
Well,
So
that's a good
please
question. Was
donate.
it yeah, was it on display for a while after it was completed? I know that
No,
COVID interrupted it and then
yeah.
it's never been put on display,
The
right?
whole
Or
thing has never been put on display because we need such a specific environment to do it.
hmm
Yeah.
hmm
So as I
Interesting.
say, yeah, please donate. Help us build our museum.
Okay, so here's a question. Quite a few people were at the Met Chosin event where you were uh, who who were from local guilds, embroidery, quilt arts. Did you find similar audiences of embroiderers, quilters, handwork people that showed up at every town and or most towns?
Yes, yes. And that's why I say there's like
Mm-hmm.
this great sea of these people. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we don't get on the front page. Nobody's talking about all the embroiderers that just met up on a Saturday for a course, but we're out there and we are millions. And so
Yeah.
I do find because this type of work is so communal and it's so enjoyable to sit, knitting or embroidering or felting, whatever people are doing, that it creates an environment to create guilds and groups that meet regularly, and it's so enjoyable. People share their work, like the lady with the squid ink. This was a showcase at the Hand Weavers Guild of Boulder, and I thought it was like a sale. They were having sort of a, I don't know, an open house sale, but it wasn't. It was just a showcase to say, hey, look what we did since our last meeting, and all these inspiring ideas. And so ours, of course, just fit in perfectly.
Okay. Here's a question that I had, so I know the answer because I already asked you personally. But how did you handle? You have all of humanity stitching this thing. Obviously, some young children, people with no experience, people with a lot of experience, but there's the potential for mistakes to be made in the embroidery stitches. How were those handled? Were they removed, redone? Were they stitched over? Were they just left as it is?
So this is one of what I find one of the most remarkable aspects of this project is that it was decided from the very beginning that this would not be the like a closed system of experts. This was going to be open to anybody who came to sew. And originally, the tapestry was sewn in a Saga center that's in this town, Claudia, and people could just come in literally off the street. I was one of those people. You could just go to the center, walk around, see the history of Njall Saga, eat lunch in their kind of Viking longhouse restaurant, and then wander over. And at first, I didn't know that anybody could sew. I just wandered in and, ooh, wow, amazing. And finally, it was like, okay, enough talking, sit down and sew. And it's like, why would you let me sew? Exactly to your point. I might not even know how to thread a needle.
hmm
So when you'd come to the center, you would be taught how to thread a needle because you can't lick the thread. The saliva is bad for the wool. And so you'd learn how to wrap it around and tuck it through the eye. And then I'll share the picture again.
hmm
The structure has these top and bottom bands, and we're seeing that. Okay. So you see those four lines that frame that center band of action. And those four lines are sewn in just like an outline stitch. It's a running contour stitch, it's called. So you would start there. They would show you what to do. And some of it is really awful, and some of it is absolutely perfect and stunning. And somebody once said, when everybody leaves and if their work is really bad, do you pull it out? And they said, no, because this is the mark of all these hands. This is the mark of everybody who came to sew. It's like their signature. So some of it's really wonky looking and some of it's really beautiful. And then as people got more practiced and if they were staying around or if some people went and came back, there's a woman who's a professor in Colorado, Avadan Raggio. She came to sew, I think, 4 times. That was her vacation for all the years they were sewing this. So people would become more expert, and then you would be invited to sew something that was a little bit more difficult. And so everybody could sew, as I say, but then if you wanted to sew things that were more complicated, you had to show that you had some capacity to do at least sort of do it well.
Hmm.
But this is also a testament to the forgiving nature of this stitch. Even on the traveling tapestry, this was mostly sewn by very, very expert people. Some of it doesn't look that great if you get up close, because this is a forgiving stitch, but it can also be a difficult stitch, especially if you're
Hmm.
trying to sew curves and things. So it's just a real showcase of everyone's ability. And it's also a testament to what it means to trust a community. I think that to me is one of the most incredible ideas that you trust people to do a good enough
Hmm.
job. And they did. They rose to the
That's
occasions.
great.
Yeah.
So, Karen Gummo, who's been a frequent guest on our
Yes,
on
yay.
our webinar and is an artist in Markerville,
Yes.
she said that you must have had your finger on the pulse of communities far and wide. And did you keep a diary, or are you planning on documenting the saga of the pilgrimage you made in 2025?
Um, yes, I certainly kept lots of notes and have tons and tons of pictures. Um, I think that would be a great idea, Karen, and we should collaborate.
Right.
Um,
I mean, there are very
yeah.
famous books, Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie, where he goes
Yeah.
around and meets different
Yes.
people, different communities. You could do something like that.
And I do know too that the founders are definitely planning to do like the saga of the saga. That at some point they will do their own book
Hmm.
too to talk about the actual 90-meter sewing. And maybe we'll be a chapter at the end or something. Yeah.
That's great. You mentioned that there would be a vote in the future to decide which of three or more options for a building that would house the tapestry. Has there
Yes.
been any decisions on that, or is that contingent on funding or?
There we're moving forward. And so
Mhm.
when we first were looking at this, there were 3 ideas. One was to build an extension to the Lava Center. If anyone's been to Butler and been to this phenomenal exhibit all about lava, and there was that thought. Then there was a thought to refurbish a supermarket space. And then the third one was an idea that had to do with reconfiguring the center of town and adding this in. My understanding is that now the supermarket space seems to be the best idea and the most cost effective. And so the last I heard, they were running the numbers, and I have not heard a final decision, but it was definitely moving in that direction. And I think that that's a great choice because it will probably mean the least fundraising in terms of
Yeah,
the amount that we'll need. So I look forward to updating everybody when I have my next update. But the last I heard was they were running the numbers about the supermarket space, which will be a fabulous space. I know it sounds kind of who wants to be in a supermarket, but it'll all be
well, hopefully
gutted.
they'll
Yeah,
adjust the lighting or
yeah,
something. No,
yes.
no
No, it'll all be
fluorescent.
gutted, and it
It's
has
not
to
going to be a
be.
bonus.
No, it will not be a bonus. And of course, I mean, anybody who knows anything about preservation, it has to be temperature controlled and light controlled and humidity. And one day, Gunhildur said to me, "We have to figure out if there's a fire, how we get it out of there." And I thought,
Oh
wow,
yeah.
like I hadn't even thought of that. So
Hmm.
we'll bring in all those museum experts, and Iceland is has a phenomenally deep, um, what would you say, like community of preservation, and so we're in good hands. And right now, the tapestry itself is in the National Museum cold storage in Hafnarfjörður. So they have
Okay,
taken it
that's
under
where.
their wing, and yeah, so it's very safe. And then we'll just have to reconfigure that space so that we have the right exhibit spaces. And we have a really good architect. She's an Icelandic woman who lives actually in Denmark, but she is obsessed with fiber. She has her own wool company. Her name is Christine, another Christine, Brynja Gunnarsdóttir, not Christine, Ragna Gunnarsdóttir. Um, and she has a lovely company called Einrum that spins Icelandic wool with Thai silk to get just a
Hmm.
completely other type of fiber experience. So she's her motif is this idea of like unfurling, because that's how the tapestry took place in itself. It was sewn and then it would be furled on this big spool. So she wants to
Hmm.
kind of keep this motif as part of the exhibit.
So, a couple people have asked about funding, and maybe you can't answer, but are there? You said they're making progress. Is it
Yeah.
still going on, additional fundraising, or is it coming to an end?
Well, anybody who again knows anything about fundraising is you have to have a goal. And you can't have a
Right,
goal until you know what you're building. And so
right,
we've had kind
right.
of a nebulous goal of needing about $1 million to build the actual exhibits. In
Hmm.
terms of refurbishing and let's say a supermarket space, I don't have a budget on that, but we're doing very well. We're in about the $750,000 range. And we've had a lot of help from the Icelandic government. They've given probably about $400,000 of that. We've had help from the United States, about the same, about maybe $300,000. And then on the tour, we raised about 40,000. So
Hmm.
we're definitely getting there. If you'd like to donate, there are two ways. You can donate to Icelandic Roots. They have a little button you can click that says help the Njál Saga tapestry. And then I believe like INLUS can give grants. So I believe if you donate to INLUS, then if they feel like giving a grant to this, they can. Um, so there are mechanisms, and then you can just mail checks if you don't want a tax deduction. Um,
So there you go. If you're listening, you can donate at Icelandic Roots. There's a special button. Is it a sewing button or is it just a regular? It's
It's
probably
just
just a regular
in
button.
their list,
That would have been
like
a good idea.
yeah, that's good. I like that.
And then you
But
can also donate through Endless. Okay,
yeah.
great. Um, Someone asked if the tapestry has traveled around Iceland, but I don't think it's been shown at all, right? Because it's a football field length and they haven't found, they completed it and then they didn't
And then it
travel
was
with it, I
COVID. It
imagine.
literally was
Oh,
completed
right,
during
COVID
COVID.
happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have to remember that, because it sounds like we're dragging our feet, but there was such a curveball, as we all know from how it impacted all
Right.
of our lives. So here was a crowd-sown project that as of March 2020, they had about, I want to say like 5 meters left to sew. And as of March 2020, they had to be completely bubbled, no more of, so it wasn't crowd-sown after that. And then September 15th of 2020, they actually finished. And I don't think they would have finished as quickly if it hadn't been for COVID, because nobody could go and do anything. So,
Hmm.
if you
Right.
could work
Right.
remotely, you could, and if you couldn't, who knows what you were doing, so you could go and sew. So I think that there was a very nice benefit in that regard. Um, but I don't believe that the main tapestry will be taken on the road around Iceland, but certainly the traveling tapestry. And so there are
Okay.
galleries that want to display it, and that's something we've just returned, so we need to have those conversations, and then
Do
find
you
a
do you know how much it weighs? It, I mean, has anyone ever
the
weighed it?
90 meters.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, that's an interesting question
Um,
because I mean, to like hang that, is going to require a lot of
Yes.
structural
Yes,
purity. Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, we have time for one more question. Is there are there any plans to do another tapestry, maybe another saga, Grettir's Saga, or some other one of the major sagas, or some other project that helps promote Icelandic culture or the sagas in this way?
Well, they're already happening. So Njál Saga was actually inspired once Gunhildur and Christina had this idea.
Hmm.
Up in Blundaós, there's a excuse me, there's a textile center, and they had started sewing. Let's see, Njál Saga was started in 2013. I think they started sewing their tapestry in 2011. And if you just Google like Blundaós Textile Center or Icelandic Textile Center in the north of Iceland, it'll come up. I think it's technically called the Kvennaskóla or Skóli.
Okay. Yeah, we
So,
visited there this summer, the textile museum. Yeah. Okay, so
yes,
they're working on.
they're working on, and I apologize, I always forget the name of the saga. It's like Volander Saga or something. Um, And then another community in the Snæfellsnes area has already started one, and I don't remember the saga. But if you just Google these things like Icelandic tapestries, Icelandic sagas, sewn in tapestries, you'll find all these trails. So it's becoming kind of a thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of communities around the country start doing this. And then what happens is they get on the textile tours. So there's a really nice textile tour called the Woolen Circle. It's not the Golden
Mhm.
Circle, but it's the Woolen Circle.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And you can go up to this Blundaós um, place, and then you can go to down on the south coast. There's a woman who, her name is Dora. She spins her own wool, dyes with local plants. So she's part of this woolen circle. And then there's a woman in Selfoss. Her company's called Hespa,
Hmm.
Hespa. She does a similar thing. I don't think she spins her own wool, but she's very interested in local plant dyeing. So that's the woolen circle. And Njál Saga will be added to that. And then maybe these other tapestries as well. So there'll be a lot to see.
That's
Yeah.
exciting. I
And
like the woolen
there already
circle.
is a lot to see.
Yeah. So we'll end it with a comment by Karen Gummo. Thanks to you both for your generous and artistic endeavors. I've been stitching a panel of Gunnar on his horse, Ohesti, as I listen to you. So,
Bravo, Karen. That's fabulous.
okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Claudia. This is just an amazing, amazing project. And every time I hear about it, I get more excited and uh,
Oh, thank
glad
you,
that you're
Casey.
involved and had brought it to our continent. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody too for joining. Thank you.